Hey guys, it's the Beardy Red Viking. I hope you're all well. I'm here today with a new type of video, something I've not done before. It's actually an idea suggested to me by a guy called David who runs the channel Garage Geek. He does all sorts of videos about music, about vinyl records, about pop figures, about comic books, about movies, about books he's been reading. Really interesting channel, very diverse. His musical tastes are somewhat different for the most part to my own. I actually found him through the competition which I started around a month back now regarding the 125 subscribers mark, which I had hit at the time. I have now massively superseded that, so thank you very much to everyone who has subscribed both before and since then. And if you still want to into that competition, it's still open until the 25th of November, so you've still got plenty of time to do that. Also, if you do make a video, please leave a comment on my original video to let me know that you have done, just so I can make sure that I've seen everyone's videos, because there is a possibility I might miss them otherwise. I should have mentioned that at the time, but I didn't. So yeah, if you could please give me a shout on there if I have either missed your video and you've already done one, or if you're going to make one in the future, please do let me know. But yeah, you've got until the 25th of November to get your entry in for that, so that's another 3 weeks exactly today as I'm getting this recorded. So it'd be good to see some more entries if you wish to do so. So yeah, going back to the video, it's an idea called Out of My Comfort Zone. Now, David has been doing this with a few other channels. You probably saw, if you're a watcher of my channel, you probably watch Kim over at This Is Music as well, so you may have already seen his video on the same subject. Now he's actually challenged me to do the same album, the same piece of music. He's actually challenged me to listen to as he challenged Kim to listen to, and I'm sure Kim's thoughts are probably a little bit more, what's the word, eloquent than mine. But yeah, he's asked me to do it, and I've also challenged him to listen to an album as well. He's already released his video in response. If you want to see David's video, he has been listening to Slaughter of the Soul by At the Gates, which is a little bit of different style to what he's challenged me to listen to. We'll get onto that in a moment. But yeah, I chose Slaughter of the Soul by At the Gates for him to listen to, because basically he's been challenging people to listen to some of his favourite albums by some of his favourite artists, and in return he's been asking mainly metalheads. Kim pointed out that he's been picking on metalheads, targeting metalheads, so to speak, which he was highly amused by. But yeah, I guess it makes sense, because obviously his music tastes are very different to a lot of ours in the metal community here on YouTube. So yeah, I think it makes for a pretty interesting video. So I chose Slaughter of the Soul because it's one of my favourite albums by one of my favourite bands, and also coincidentally I'm actually seeing At the Gates play Slaughter of the Soul in full tomorrow night at Damnation Festival. Cannot fucking wait, it's going to be amazing. I've seen him before play most of the album, to be fair, back in 2008 at Bloodstock, but there's a few tracks that weren't played that night. So the whole album in full, in sequence, absolute classic album. David struggled with it, it's fair to say. I think it was a bit more of a challenge than he might have been expecting, but I thought I'd go for something quite on the extreme side of things to make it a bit more interesting. That was what he was looking for. He was looking to find out about metal, hear a bit more metal music, and was looking to delve into the extremity of music. And he'd been listening to some stuff. He actually listened to Him, I think it was. I'm not sure what the album name is. I'm not really the biggest fan of him, but Guz69, his channel, he'd done one of these with him as well, and he recommended that he listened to Him, and I thought, I need to challenge him a little bit more than Him, don't I? So I went with Slaughter of the Soul. Now, as I say, the video is called Out of My Comfort Zone, and although I do enjoy classical music, and I wouldn't say I was out of my comfort zone listening to classical music, when it comes to making a video about classical music, and certainly an opera, I am very much out of my comfort zone, and I was a little bit concerned about what I was getting myself in for, I must be honest, when I saw it. It was a soprano who was the vocalist on this particular recording. So this is Symphony of Sorrowful Songs, it's also known as, so Symphony number 3, a symphony of sorrowful songs by Henryk Gorecki. It's performed by Dawn Upshaw, she's the soprano. The London Sinfonietta and David Zinman was the conductor. Yeah, it's a symphony in 3 movements, which apparently is unusual as they're normally in 4 movements. It's composed by Henryk Gorecki in Katowice, Poland between October and December 1976. It represented a bit of a shift from Gorecki's initial dissonant style, and he moved later into more tonal style, and it represented a stylistic breakthrough, austerely plaintive, emotionally direct, and steeped in medieval modes, according to Wikipedia. So I like to do a little bit of research before I'm going to make this video, so I at least kind of have something useful to say about the music, because my opinions on it and my thoughts and understanding of this kind of music is going to be minimal. So it's a solo soprano, who, as I say, is Dawn Upshaw in this case, singing Polish texts, the first of which is a 15th century Polish lament of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Not my scene at all, as you may well know. The second is a message which was written on the wall of a Gestapo cell during World War II, apparently by a young girl who'd been separated from her parents. And the third is a Silesian folk song of a mother searching for her son killed by the Germans in the Silesian uprisings. So it's all about loss and parental loss and being separated from your child, or in the second movement's case, being separated from your parents. So apparently the composer Gorecki was little known until 1992. He was only known by connoisseurs. But that year a recording was released of the 15-year-old symphony, which is this recording that I've been listening to here, with the Sinfonietta, and it topped the British charts and also in the United States it charted well as well. It's now sold over 1 million copies, vastly exceeding the expected lifetime sales of a typical symphonic recording by a 20th century composer. It hasn't apparently generated as much interest in his other works. But yeah, this is information I have pulled from Wikipedia. You can go and read more about it yourself if you wish to do so. But I thought it sounded interesting. I did a lot of the research after I listened to it for the first time. Now, the challenge was to listen to it twice a day for a space of a week. Now, I've got to be honest, I was challenged to this a couple of weeks back. I wasn't so well at the time, didn't get around to listen to it much at that point, and I've not had a chance to listen to it twice a day for a week. I'll be straight up honest with that. I've only listened to it twice in a day, once, which is today before recording this video, so I wanted it quite fresh in my mind. But I have listened to it quite a few times now, and yeah, these are some of my thoughts on the recording. So it's in 3 parts, 3 movements, as I say. So the first one is called Sostenuto Tranquillo ma cantabile, and it's 26 minutes and 47 seconds. So that was a little bit daunting, especially with the prospect of a soprano. Much like Kim mentioned on his channel, he described it much better, had a great analogy for the type of soprano that he particularly dislikes. I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of soprano singers at all, so that was definitely a worry going into this. And I can agree with him that there are a certain type of soprano in particular that grate me. It's like someone scratching a chalkboard. That's what it sounds like to me, it goes right through me. So I was fearful that was what we were going to be getting here. So it starts off very quietly with a solo cello playing the intro at the start, which is almost inaudible for the first 30 seconds or so, but it gradually gets louder and builds, and then a couple of minutes in, other strings start to come in, so your violins, your bass, your stand-up bass, your viola, and the strings build over the next sort of 12 to 13 minutes with a similar kind of melody, quite a simple melody, but that builds over the 12 or 13 minutes at the start, and then the piano comes in on its own around that point with a little bit of cello behind it shortly afterwards, and then Dawn Upshaw comes in with the vocals for the first time. It's very melancholic initially, and the instrumentation and vocals swell continuously for 3 minutes or so before the vocals, for me mercifully, I must be honest, bow out and the piece returns to being instrumental. Now, as I say, I can't be particularly objective about the vocals because of my distaste for sopranos in general. Soprano vocals are just something I'm not a fan of. It's a big part of the reason why I don't enjoy a lot of the symphonic metal that's out there, the female-fronted symphonic metal bands, your Nightwishes, your Within Temptations, Leaves' Eyes, all those kind of bands. I'm just not into them, and the primary reason is the vocal. I'm not a fan of sopranos in general. Now, while these vocals aren't the type of screechy, scratch your nails down a chalkboard kind of ones that go right through me that I was fearing they may be. As I say, watch Kim's video if you want a better analogy for the type of vocals I'm talking about. They weren't the style that I would prefer to listen to. I can't really get around that fact. But considering how much I dislike sopranos generally, I was quite surprised to find that I ended up, over the course of time, as I listened to this more, getting more used to it and finding the vocals more palatable than I was expecting to. Now, the fact that there's only 3 minutes of vocal in this particular first movement out of 26, 47, for me, as I say, it was a mercy. Because while I didn't hate them, I certainly do think if it was going on for 26 minutes, it would be a bit much. After it becomes an instrumental again, you get variations of the same melody throughout the rest of the time, the next sort of 10 minutes or so. There's additional flourishes of melody on top of the bass melodies as time goes on, for up until around about the 20-minute mark, where it begins to start. Well, it starts to fade, begins to slow down again, and it ends in a similar vein to how it started. Very slow, very quiet melody on the cello, but it is also joined with piano at that point as well, and then it ends after 26 minutes and 47 seconds. Overall, I did enjoy the piece. It's, as I say, it builds for a long period of time until the vocals come in. It swells continuously while the vocals are in place, and then as the vocals end, it starts to mellow out and begins to quieten back down again until it fades out at the end. So yeah, moving on to the second movement, which I would say was probably my favourite of the three. It's the shortest, so read into that what you will. It is called Lento e Largo Tranquillissimo. It's 9 minutes and 28 seconds, so significantly shorter. It begins with a fairly high-pitched set of strings and piano before entering a lower register, where the vocals come in and mimic the melody of the instrumentation. It builds a real sense of foreboding. Now, this is the piece where the vocals are representing a prayer that was written on the wall by a young girl who had been captured by the Gestapo in the Second World War. So obviously, you know, the subject matter of the music in general, the lyrics in general, are going to mean it's going to be somber. It by nature has to be, but there's a real sense of foreboding to this, which I feel is represented nicely by the fact that this is a child who has been captured and put in a very scary situation. That's what this is about. This is what this is representing. Again, over the course of time, the instrumentation swells and builds over the course of time for the next few minutes, and the vocals do over time become more prominent and more sort of, they build into a higher register, much more power in the vocal. But it never really overbears the flow of the music. In fact, I actually felt like the vocals really complemented it quite beautifully. This is a much more vocally focused piece than the first movement, and it's a lot shorter. And considering that the vocals filled most of the 9.5 minutes of this track, it was quite a surprise to me that this was probably my favourite piece out of the three. Now, in terms of that particular fact, it seems I'm not alone in feeling that way, because if you look at the Classic FM website and their description of this piece, it does state that it owes its mass appeal to the powerfully evocative second movement the setting of an 18-year-old girl's prayer inscribed on the wall of a Gestapo prison in 1944. So yeah, that's that. It seems that the second movement is quite highly regarded, and possibly the most highly regarded of the three. Now, I enjoyed all three movements. I'll be honest with you. I'll say up there, spoiler alert. The third movement is called Lento Cantabile Semplice. Now, my pronunciation, I have no idea if I'm even close to being correct, but I try. But anyway, so yeah, this piece is, again, it's a longer piece. It's about 18 minutes, this one. Again, the vocals come in a lot more quickly on this piece than they did on the first movement, though this time, rather in the second movement, where the vocals followed the melody quite straight of the instrumentation, this time she sings a much more complex, different melody to what's been played by the instruments. On 2.5 minutes, the vocals stop briefly for about 30 seconds or so and allow the music to play out a bit more. And then around about the 3-minute mark, you get a second part of vocal. It's almost like a second verse in terms of how it sounds. It's a very similar melody, very similar pattern. So it's akin to, you know, what you talk about in pop music. It's akin to a second verse, I would say. So after the second verse, if you want to call it that, it increases in power over time. And then the same thing happens again at about 5.5 minutes before you get a third verse. Now, that again is a similar kind of melody and vocal performance to the first couple of, I'm sure there's a proper word for this in terms of classical music and opera, but for me, I don't know it. So this is why I'm out of my comfort zone making videos like this. I'm going to use the term verse. So yeah, there's a third verse. After that, there's a different passage of a different melody, begins on around about the 8-minute mark, continues until the vocals stop around about the 12-minute mark. Then the original melody makes a reappearance on the 13.5-minute mark, where you get the vocals return again briefly until about the 15-minute mark, where that's when it begins to fade and the musicians bow out over time, and then the end starts to creep in. So yeah, as I say, I sound very uncomfortable in what I'm talking about here because I really don't know what I'm talking about. As I say, I enjoy classical music. Opera is pretty new to me. I've always enjoyed Nessun Dorma. I've always enjoyed the tenors, the three tenors, since about 1990. I remember hearing Nessun Dorma constantly while World Cup Italia 90 was on, and I fell in love with that piece of music, and I still love it to this day. It's not something I listen to regularly, but it's a beautiful piece of music. So I do have an appreciation for some of this type of music, for some classical music. There was a concert at my local town hall a couple of weeks back, which I meant to go to, of Gustav Holst, The Planets, which unfortunately I completely forgot about it and I didn't end up going to. So I do know a little classical music. I do enjoy classical music, but I don't know anything about it. So I went into this with a little bit of trepidation, as I say, primarily because of the vocal. In summary, what I would say is this piece, these three pieces, these three movements left me feeling emotionally quite raw. The music, the melodies are a truly beautiful listen. They're very melancholic, very somber, understandably so given the subject matter. It does make sense, obviously, given the name of the symphony being Symphony of Sorrow. And in honesty, I think there'd be parts of it that I would have preferred without vocals. But at the same time, I recognise this is a piece of opera, so that doesn't make any sense. And I couldn't, in all fairness, say that the vocals actually spoiled the experience, which was a pleasant surprise for me, because, as I've said several times in this video, sopranos terrify me. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this experience. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was about 55 minutes of music in total between the three movements, and it didn't feel like it. It didn't feel like I was sat through nearly an hour of something that I wouldn't normally listen to. I found it quite easy to listen to, quite easy to put on in the background, very relaxing. You could lie back, close your eyes and just listen to it and enjoy it. It's not something I'd put on every day by any stretch of the imagination. Probably not something I would buy either, but I could see myself going back to this occasionally. If I'm in the mood for some classical music, I could see myself dipping back into this, which is a nice surprise. I always enjoy finding new music, especially when it's something that I wasn't necessarily expecting to get on with. So thank you, David. Thank you, Garage Geek, for setting me this challenge. I enjoyed it. I hope you got some enjoyment out of Slaughter the Soul. I know you found it a little bit of a traumatic experience, shall we say, but I hope you got some enjoyment, and I hope you got something out of it. And if you want to carry on with these challenges, I'm up for doing some more. So to give me a shout, let me know. And yeah, everybody else, go and check out David's channel, Garage Geek. It's, as I say, really interesting channel. All sorts of stuff he talks about on there. Anything to do with popular culture and stuff that he's been up to in his local area. He lives in Los Angeles, I believe. So there's a lot going on around there. And yeah, really interesting channel. I've really enjoyed watching his videos since I've found it. So this competition has introduced me to quite a few new channels, and Garage Geek is one of them, and I highly recommend going and checking out. I'll leave a link at the end of this video so you can go and check out his stuff. I'll also leave a link to his companion video where he reviews Slaughter the Soul, gives his opinions on that. So yeah, make sure you go out and check that out if you have chance. So thank you for watching. If you stuck through all of this, much appreciated. I know it's very different to what I normally do. I will be back to the regularly scheduled programming. I say that ironically because there's no regular schedule with what I do whatsoever. But I will be back with something a little bit more typical very soon. As I say, I'm going to Damnation Festival this weekend. So my plan, provided I don't get too drunk tomorrow night, is to try and get a review, a bit of a vlog kind of thing, a bit like what I did with Incineration Festival and then never ended up doing for Reaper Fest, which I intended to do. But I do intend on getting that done in the early part of next week, so look out for that. So thanks very much, take care, hope you all have a great weekend. Beardy Red Viking, out.